Shogun 2, cleared to fire.
Shogun 2, cleared to fire. Shogun 2, Fox.
Light Sergeant. Fox.
Shogun 2, Tally Hill, engage.
Nomad 3, cleared to fire.
An F-4 inbound. An enemy that wants to blow you out of the sky. This is the target run, an aviator's gauntlet of AAA, SAMs, and hostile MiGs. This is the story of the high-speed run that comes down to getting in, getting out, and getting your bombs on target.
Okay, 2, Fox 2, Fox 2.
Turn the drone. Drone is turning.
Devil 4, cleared to fire.
Level 4, cleared to fire. Level 4, Fox.
Mike,
In combat aviation, there are no milk runs. Yes, there are days the enemy doesn't come up to meet you, and days when not a SAM is fired. But for the pilot, the challenge remains. Stay alert. Expect the unexpected. See the enemy before he sees you. And when in doubt, press on. Fly your mission. Trust your skills. Trust your jet. And say a little prayer. Pressing on. Yeager, Anderson, Peterson, Olds. They've all talked about it. They've all done it. It's how you get in and get out. You go. You do it. And you do it well. Even against the odds.
We just went into the fleet, tried to get around the destroyers and then the cruisers and things to take whatever came first as a target. They had about 75 airplanes down there trying to eat us up, and we only had 15, so we didn't last very long. I was tail end Charlie, last aircraft in the whole formation, and I was kind of sitting back here watching this whole thing. I made my attack on this carrier, and I somehow got in close enough to drop my torpedo and get through.
The run-in Vietnam had all the threats a pilot has to consider. Irregular terrain, an enemy hidden by the jungle camouflage, SAM sites, anti-aircraft fire, small arms fire, and a hostile air force out there, somewhere, with proven pilots capable against our best. One of Vietnam's air aces speaks about the air war there. Notice SAMs, air-to-air missiles, and AAA in the footage.
Air combat in Southeast Asia is a very thrilling experience, if you want to call it that. The missions lasted anywhere from 3 to 5 hours long, or at least the air-to-air missions up north did. There was a lot of times when nothing was happening, and of course there was a few minutes in there where all hell was breaking loose. And of course our mission up in Southeast Asia, up in North Vietnam, was to go after the MiGs. It was our job to make sure that the MiGs didn't get through the strike flights, and we felt we did a good job at that. The North Vietnamese engaged in combat with us on numerous occasions. The tactics we flew were very offensive, and sometimes the North Vietnamese didn't like us or wouldn't come up and fight with us because we were so offensive. On some occasions we had to tone our flights down, become a little more defensive in nature, and let them come up after us. Then when they got too close to us, we turned on them and the fight was on when they couldn't get away.
In the south, meanwhile, the enemy continued to strike, harass, and kill with hit-and-run guerrilla tactics. U.S. efforts were taking effect, and the North Vietnamese decided on a significant reversal of their tactics. They went on the offensive throughout the south. The result was the Tet Offensive of early 1968. This change of tactics brought on the Battle of Khe Sanh. On this tiny piece of real estate, bisected by a single dirt landing strip, a handful of U.S. Marines and Vietnamese Rangers faced an encircling band of North Vietnamese forces totaling 20,000 men, 2 full divisions. The North Vietnamese desperately needed a victory. Khe Sanh was conceived by the enemy to be the American version of Dien Bien Phu, a battle won by the North Vietnamese that broke the back of the French resistance and led to the Geneva Accords.
From the ground, one sometimes wonders how it was that any jet got in, out, and back in one piece. Truly a fog bank of confusion, smoke, debris, and hostile fire. The pilot flying down on the deck across this disorienting, charred piece of land called Khe Sanh must find the friendlies and get his eyes on the target, pickle his load, and get out in a matter of seconds.
The long-range strategic B-52s were used in a close air support role against enemy troop concentrations. Day and night, each plane with its 30-ton bomb load blasted enemy bunkers, gun emplacements, and supply areas. In the end, the North Vietnamese were forced to withdraw. Over 10,000 North Vietnamese regulars, the equivalent of 1 full division, had been decimated. Air power was the vital factor in the victory at Khe Sanh.
When it didn't work, a pilot had few choices but to get out of the jet and hope for the best. When that happened, the SAR mission swung into action.
Never before had so many aircraft and men been used to rescue downed pilots.
Look at the fireworks. Okay, keep looking. Count present 3 o'clock.
Put it right behind him. Hold your hover. Hold your hover. Taking out the slack. Hold your hover. Hold your hover. Hold your hover. Slack's out. Survivor's coming up. Hold your hover, babe. Hold your hover. Looking good. Hold your hover. Hold your hover. Survivor's coming up. It's about 10 foot off the ground. Hold your hover. Hold your hover. Hold your hover. Survivor's coming up. Hold your hover. You're close to the tree. Hold your hover. It's right about 10 foot below the aircraft. 10 foot below the aircraft. Hold your hover, babe. Hold your hover. 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 Survivors at the door. Driver's coming in the door. Driver's in and secure. Let's get the hell out of here. Okay, talk to me. We're coming out. Okay.
They're really hanging out. I just can't say enough about those guys. It's a heck of a way to find out how great they are, but when it happens, so they're there 100% for you.
The Soviet threat, now gone, triggered decades of arms development and decades of refinements that honed the technology of war-making to a razor-fine edge. The product spawned by those many years of the Cold War today amply arm nations throughout the world. One need only look back to the Gulf War to see just how deadly such technology can still be. Thus it is that films such as these, while dated, are useful reminders of the threats our pilots may one day face over a battlefield few today can even imagine.
It was a classic SA-2 engagement, the same type of thing we trained for back in the States on our missions and on our simulators. When the first detonation went off, I knew what it was, and my first reaction was that we're okay. I did not lose any of my equipment. The cabin didn't depressurize. The engine sounded normal. And I was just at the point thinking that we were going to make it through that okay when suddenly the rest of the crew started reporting the damage and loss of systems on the airplane.
Soviet air forces play a critical role in warfare planning. Over 700 long-range and medium-range bombers, over 5,200 fighters and fighter bombers, some 2,250 interceptors, and nearly 600 transport aircraft are employed. The air forces continue to improve their tactical aircraft. New generations of fighter bombers and fighter interceptors are being added. The Mach 2 Su-27 flanker and the MiG-29 Fulcrum with true look-down, shoot-down radar carry long-range and shorter-range air-to-air missiles. Introduction earlier this decade of the MiG-31 Foxhound Homeland Defense Interceptor has been yet another indicator of the Soviet Air Force's transition to increasingly more capable combat aircraft. Investing heavily in increasingly more capable air defense weapons, the Soviets now have 9,000 strategic surface-to-air missile launchers, nearly 5,000 tactical surface-to-air missile launchers, and 10,000 air defense radars. They also employ highly mobile SAMs for air defense. The mobile SA-12A is intended to intercept aircraft at all altitudes. The SA-12 system's second missile, the SA-X-12B Giant, currently under development, will be able to intercept aircraft, cruise missiles, tactical ballistic missiles, and possibly some strategic ballistic missiles. Other long-range systems include the SA-5 and the fixed-site and mobile SA-10. Soviet strategic surface-to-air missiles are designed to provide a layered barrier defense under all weather conditions. These missiles can intercept cruise missiles, tactical ballistic missiles, aircraft at all altitudes, and some types of strategic ballistic missiles.
This 1980s Air Force film is hailed as a classic in the pilot community. It summarizes the task-saturated environment of the target run and the means employed by the pilot to get in and get out in one piece. What it says is as true today as it was 10 years ago. Train the way you fight. Fight the way you train.
This film will help you to better understand what realistic training is and why it is so essential to our national defense. Much of what you will see and hear will appear to be actual combat. It is not. These scenes were filmed during TAC training and testing. Destroyed aircraft and vehicles are unmanned. The enemy is not real, except, as you will soon see, to the men flying the planes.
Continue pressing 360, there's your right 1 o'clock now for 6.
Okay, one bandit spit out northwest 3 miles. Look across the circle for the other one about a mile.
Copy that. Bandit's now 15036, still tracking north.
This is training realism. Realistic air combat training. It's what's happening today at TAC. Training as realistic as we can make it to ensure our air crews are ready now. We learned the importance of realistic training in Southeast Asia. A large percentage of the air crews we lost went down during their first 10 combat missions. It took that long to learn how to grapple with enemy ground and air threats while pressing the attack on assigned targets. After those first 10 missions, as crews learned to cope, losses fell off dramatically. It was obvious that old training methods hadn't prepared our people to handle these multiple demands simultaneously.
You're all armed up, right?
A new approach was needed. Today, complex and very real exercises like the multi-threat environment of Red Flag, where much of this film was shot, give our air crews the experience they need. Provide those critical first 10 combat missions with enemy guns that have film in their magazines, not bullets.
are long, tedious affairs. Up to 6 hours would not be uncommon, with a stop or two on the boom to get some gas and collect your thoughts. Then, the target run. While inbound flight profiles are as varied as the defenses, the terrain, and the jets, the high-speed, low-level pass is one of the most dramatic. The reward for getting in? A battlefield rich with high-value targets.
Ideally, low level, we fly, we mask ourselves in the terrain, and that way radar can't see us, eyeballs can't see us, and we can get in pretty deep and then into the threat area before they'll know we're coming.
Firing at 5-2.
The A-10s, heavier and slower than most attackers, rely on their titanium bathtub and heavy armoring to protect them against ground fire. Inbound, they punch flares, fly a boxy, high-low, high profile, then let go a burst of 30-millimeter cannon fire, firing at the rate of 4,000 rounds a minute. The F-16, agile but fragile, yanks and banks with the best of them, using high-speed jinks to deny the enemy a tracking solution, punches flares and pickles its high-drag bombs, using speed to get out of the concussion ring. Of course, not all of the turning and burning is reserved for the fighters and attackers. For the crew of a B-52, a good low level makes the day a bit more sporting, while allowing the jet to use the element of surprise, low and close to the ground, against good defenses. It is a marvelous sight, with bomb bay doors opening and tight 45-degree turns.
let's go. Impact cameras on, impact cameras on. Bullseye. 2, 1, release. Item away. 30. And stand by, let's go. Impact cameras on, impact cameras on.
Ground-based defenses are technology-driven, and they've gotten better each year. Radar guidance and fire control systems give convoy and fleet defense batteries an incredible degree of accuracy and lethality. In fact, some systems directly borrow their technology from the jets they are designed to defeat. Battlefield commanders particularly like 25 to 47 millimeter anti-aircraft cannon fire. Locked on, few aircraft can escape the tightly clustered fire of explosive shells. At sea, a single missile below the waterline can sink a ship. Mention the Exocet missile, and seamen will just nod their heads. For fleet defense, the captain wants to stop an aggressor aircraft as far away from the ships as he can. The first line of defense is a fighter armed with a powerful air intercept missile. The next weapon of choice? A ship-launched guided missile. Any guided missile, with range, and with payload mighty enough to knock the target out of the sky with a proximity detonation. A familiar sight to pilots is this classic SA-2 SAM site. 6 mobile launchers surrounding a single radar control trailer. Arrayed so that each missile covers a narrow sector. The better to point, click, and launch in seconds. Note the A-10s and F-16s taking practice turns against this site. Nothing pleases a pilot more than to knock down a SAM site, for himself and for his buddies. SAMs. They seem to come out of nowhere and get to your jet in seconds. Thankfully, there are sensors and there are smoke trails to get your attention. SAMs have been refined year in and year out. Ours or theirs, they perform the same, with better tracking and guidance, faster firing solutions, and more explosive force.
The first thing you see when a threat goes off on the ground, if it's a surface-to-air missile, you look down, you hardly ever, I have never seen just a flash off the ground and then the missile actual launch. If I got a launch indication, I look that direction, and then what I see now is the smoke trail and the fire plumes from the missile.
These desert tests demonstrate the amazingly accurate, precise intercept capability of SAMs. accurate against targets far smaller than the jets they are designed to kill.
Wait, Sam line.
Break for a Sam.
Waiter 6. Struck one, took a hit. Struck one, took a hit.
Status?
Okay, I got a fire. I'm, stand by. I'm just south of steer point number 7. Still flying, and I'm heading south.
Copy.
Okay, I took a pretty good hit.
Copy.
SA3, I think. Stroke 3, come on. Stroke 3, check right, break right. Stroke 3, break right.
Sam right, Sam.
Stroke 3, break right, Sam line.
Stroke 3, break forward. Sam right, 3. Sam, no.
Wait, somebody got a hit.
Left 4 hit.
Enemy squad. Understand your hit? 4, negative bad guy squad. Negative friendly squad.
Flap 7, visual left 9. Stroke 4, status. Flap 4, status.
Stroke 3, dressing southeast.
Stroke 8, flying. Top up and south. Another SAM launch, same location.
Sam! Sam, southeast of the target area!
You never fly straight and level for longer than, I would say, a half a second. You're always doing belly checks. You know, your airplane's upside down just as often, just as much as it is right side up. You're checking 6 just as much as you're checking 12, and you're spending as little time in the cockpit as possible.
Stroke 3, defending 6. Wow!
Sam launch.
Stroke 3, defending.
Stroke 8, jettison. Copy, stroke. Status? Copy. Copy.
There's another one. Stroke 3, defending again.
The F-117 added a new tool to the commander's bag of tactical aviation tricks. Low observability, radar invisible, which means guided missiles, so effective against the strikers, now see nothing. Nothing. And with nothing to hone in on, they passed through the sky as if the stealth wasn't there. For F-117 pilots, this technology meant a return trip home instead of a hot seat into Baghdad.
I looked off on the right-hand side and I saw what appeared to be flares. At least that was my first impression. And I went, oh gosh, they're shooting flares. And then it took about a nanosecond later, and it was, those aren't flares, that's AAA, and they're shooting at me. And the stuff was just going off all around me.
Item away.
Sadly, things don't always work as they should. In this next sequence, you'll see the bombs that turn out to be duds, the missiles that skip, canisters that break up in midair, and the pilot, too focused on the bomb run, flying the jet into the ground. bomb run is the most task-saturated environment in aviation. Switchology, flying the jet, head in and head out, evading the defenses. Today, a fighter crew delivers the same tonnage as a fully crewed B-17. Has the job gotten any easier? No. But the technology and the training and the tactics have all combined to make the pilot and the jet more than equal to this incredible challenge of flight.
You know, any threat is just as lethal as the next, regardless of how advanced the threat is or how basic the threat is. You know, bullet's still a bullet, and a missile's still a missile, and the one that hits your airplane is the most lethal for you. Every mission, particularly during wartime, to get my whole mind straight and to put things in proper perspective, there was a prayer that I kept a copy of in my pocket that someone gave me that I said before. O St. Joseph, whose protection is so great, so strong, so prompt before the throne of God, I offer you all my interests and desires. O St. Joseph, I offer you all my interests and desires. I never weary contemplating you or Jesus asleep in your arms. I dare not approach while he reposes near your heart. Press him in my name and kiss his fine head for me, and ask him to return the kiss when I draw my dying breath. O St. Joseph, patron of departed souls, pray for us.